Great. I request you to stay seated. I think we're going to go directly into our next panel again, which is focused on India's biotech ecosystem. May I request Dr. Manish Diwan from BIRAC, who will be chairing this panel, to come up on stage first. Dr. Manish Diwan is Head of Strategic Partnerships and Entrepreneurship Development at BIRAC. For those of you who are not familiar with BIRAC, please look it up right now. They're doing amazing work in the field of biotech and supporting startups in that space in India. Joining Dr. Diwan will be Dr. Markandeya Virantla, Chairman and Managing Director at ATGC Biotech. Dr. Arun Anand, Managing Director and COO at Immunil Therapeutics. And Vinod Kumar, Managing Director and Co-founder of String Bio. This session is powered by BIRAC. A big thank you to them for their support. And can I now hand it over to Dr. Diwan to take forward this session. And may I request all of you to please get seated.
Should we wait for a couple of minutes so that the transition happens between the two audiences? The other one. I think the previous session was on the mobility, and this particular session we will try and bring a flavor of technology-driven innovations leading to translation of products, solving larger issues in healthcare sciences, agri-tech, industrial biotechnology, looking at greener solutions that can replace dependence on non-renewable resources, bioplastics, biodegradable other polymers, biofertilizers, biopesticides, looking at a cleaner, sustainable future. I represent BIRAC. BIRAC is a not-for-profit central enabler that facilitates technology-driven solutions to solve all these problems and encourages enterprise creation, and once created, helps them take their journey forward towards commercialization. I think many of us are familiar with what happened in the COVID days. We were immunized, vaccinated with vaccines that were created, developed, and manufactured in India, so as to quickly cover and protect the healthcare pandemic challenge, which was imminent and right before all of us. The reason that India's ecosystem could reflect back quickly on this challenge, bring new vaccines within no time, very short amount of time. The background activity of how these innovations could be nurtured, preclinical studies, animal testing, laboratory testing, in vitro, in vivo, and then reaching out in the market through the regulatory approvals. So that entire breadth of ecosystem is covered and supported through national enabling effort with BIRAC and DBT. So I think today's session, what we have tried is try to bring an exposure of that large ecosystem ensemble that comprises of 6,000 plus deep tech life sciences startups, a infrastructure that has spread out across 21 states, UTs in terms of physical infrastructure for bioincubation, clinical trial network sites that are there, 31 of them, the common access, high-end facilities, and the vast pipeline of entrepreneurs who wanted to tread on the biotech innovation ecosystem. So from that pool, we have three representation from healthcare sciences, from industrial biotech sciences, and agri and allied areas representation. So with me, I have on panel, let me read out a little bit of brief background so that we are more familiar. I have next to me Dr. Markande. Markande is a scientist and a corporate person. He is a CMD and co-founder of ATGC venture. This company specializes in insects family planning, if I may say so. So the crop protection basically. We'll get to hear from Dr. Markande soon. Dr. Arun is a non-practitioner, but he's a MD in medicine, and he's the CEO and board director of a venture company called Immunil. The company focuses on advanced cell and gene therapies, and he's a pioneer in starting the CAR therapy in India, and their company is leading India to the forefront of healthcare ecosystem at par with the world. Next to Dr. Arun, Dr. Vinod represents again a technical, well-trained person from mechanical engineering background. He is the co-founder and managing director of String Bio. So they string around the atoms and convert them into proteins and address a larger global environmental challenge through that endeavor. We'll get to hear that. So before we begin, I think the previous panel was on mobility, and we all understand the car and the things around it. So Arun represents a company which deals with car, but it is not the same four-wheel car. It is the chimeric antigen receptor dedicated T cells. So I would request Arun to kindly throw us some light what his company does, what he does, what is the innovation that we as an Indian can be proud of that brings us at par with the world. Over to you.
Thank you very much, TICON, MCR, and BIRAC for having us over. Probably not to belittle the mobility issue, but I think we're working on a much more important car. So let me give you a case history. I think that's the best way to tackle this. Imagine today you have a 3-year-old child or a 4-year-old child who's been diagnosed with leukemia. Patients are, of course, both adult and
leukemia is one form of cancer,
blood cancer
that debilitates and progresses and leading to fatality.
Very aggressive form of blood cancer. Typically children less than 18 years of age, but traditionally we've seen it in 5, 6, 7-year-olds. And it progresses very rapidly. Right now, the current care that's available is about 2.5 years of chemotherapy. Just imagine, a 4-year-old or 5-year-old is supposed to be playing in the park, instead is coming to the hospital every 3 weeks with their parents, undergoing chemo, and it's really very difficult for both the child as well as the parents. The entire ecosystem is disrupted. Parents are not able to contribute to the nation's economy. They're not productive in that sense because they're distraught. And about 50 to 60% of these children do reasonably well at the end of 2.5 years. About 30 to 40% of them progress and die. And even in these 50-60% of patients who do well, their disease doesn't come back, but they have debilitating symptoms associated with high-dose chemo, with steroid use, mental retardation, really not a great life. With the technology that we are trying to bring to the country, we're shrinking that 2.5 years to 1 month. We are shrinking multiple lines of chemotherapy to a single week, 20-minute infusion given 3 times, using their own cells. What we are bringing is chimeric antigen receptor therapy, which is essentially taking the patient's immune cells, editing them, creating supercells, and giving it back to that same patient. It doesn't go to somebody else. So in true sense, it's personalized, it's bespoke, it's autologous therapy for each individual cancer patient in the blood cancer space. We're just about 4 years old now. We started in 2019, and then 20 and 21 were COVID years. That was the time when we built India's first cell therapy manufacturing facility in a hospital. It's probably one of the world's best that we have seen, because it's never done. Usually you have biomanufacturing plants outside. Through that journey, we raised our seed, we raised our Series A, and now we're at the cusp of Series B. Through this journey, we've treated about 20 patients. 1 month after treating patients, about 8 out of 10 children don't have cancer. We don't know whether they'll relapse. That's still a study that's ongoing. But at least what we have seen in the follow-up of 9 to 10 months in some of these children, they're back to playing games, they're playing their regular life, they're out of hospital. Which is a very, very huge transformation for these kinds of patients. And that's what Immunil Therapeutics is all about. A different kind of car, but truly meaningful car for people who have cancer.
Coming back to the life. And I think those who do not know, CAR T-cell therapy is not common, and there are only few countries where the CAR T-cell therapy is now available. US, China, some of the European countries, and that's about it. Not enough. So India is right there at the front end, along with the innovations part. And you want to
today, if you want to get cell therapies like CAR T therapies in the US, it will cost you about $1 million, 7 crores. We're trying to bring this at 1/10 of that price. Hopefully, in the next 3 to 5 years, we may be able to offer it much lower. But at least 1/4 to 1/5 is something we can target right away.
So if somebody is down with leukemia, where to find Immunil? Where are you looking?
We are based in Bangalore. Hopefully we'll be based in multiple other places. But our mission is to bring cell therapies to places where right now there is access problems. So make in India, be in India, showcase India as the proof of concept that this can be done in low resource, constrained environments with huge impact. And then demonstrate that it's possible in other parts of the world where right now there is no access. We're talking about Middle East, North Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Latin America. It's a global play that we are trying to do, but starting off with India as the hotbed of innovation.
The Majumdar Shaw
At the
Medical
Majumdar Shaw
Foundation.
Medical Center, we're funded by global VCs, we're funded by Indian VCs, philanthropists, family offices, quite a few diverse hospitals, quite a few diverse groups of people have come together to fund this initiative.
Fantastic. Great.
And also, I must add, BIRAC, non-dilutive funding from BIRAC to help us with the clinical trials.
I think very important at the early stage of startups, when you're building those innovations, the non-dilutive funding, as we were talking, it's something very fundamental in order to make them enable for angel and VC funding raise as a follower. I will bring and introduce Dr. Markande at this point. As I said, that he's the family planning man, but he does it for not for human but for insects. Over to you, Dr.
Thank you, Dr. Mani. I think the fear of COVID is gone, so that's why we don't see people. So life science is such an area where people see them when in distress. So what is the future distress we are again going to face is because of climate change. There is one other dimension to it. It's metabolism of insects. So the metabolism of insects is, for every 1 degree, it's growing exponentially, the insect metabolism leading with very high breeding rate. very high breeding rate in such a way. You have seen the episode of locust. All of you only know locust, but there are several episodes in agriculture more severe than that. The insects land, they eat away entire crop in, not the insect, they lay eggs, the larvae eat away entire crop in just 1 week. So these are called insect epidemics. So globally, invasive pests have become now a serious problem because of this climate change. 10 years down, the next 10 years down the line, you will see if the climate change continues, 50% of the food grains will be eaten in front of you. You will be helpless. And that's where the situation is. And coming to crop protection, the biotech way, that was my title. So how biotech is helping crop protection is totally new, isn't it? So we are, in India, we are trying to develop India as a global gateway for first ag biosimilars. So what we are doing is, we are producing pheromones, which are basically hormones of female insect, which emit for the male to attract and then mate. So each insect basically lays about 200 to 1,000 eggs. And in each crop cycle, you will have at least 5 broods. In second cycle itself, you will see millions. So with the climate change, since the breeding has increased, the insecticides what have been designed is only to address certain number of population, 30 adults. That is where all of our insecticides are designed. Today we have 10,000 in the field. If you track, if you monitor, that's the kind of population.
30 to 10,000.
30 to 10,000. So insecticides are no way will be able to manage the population. So what's the next solution? Is there any new molecules coming? With the new regulations like environmental concerns, the discovery of new molecules has exceeded $3 billion. So it takes 300 million to even get the product right, and then thereafter several millions of dollars for marketing. However, the success rate is hardly 10% at that level, at the success level. Initial screening is almost like a few lakhs of molecules have to be screened. So entire ag industry, Bayer, DuPont, you name the companies, all put together, if they launch 2-3 molecules in the next 1 decade, it's a great support for the farmers. But that's not going to happen. Now what is new? Mating disruption. That's where we are trying to bridge. We position India as a global gateway for this particular class of molecule. It's changing insect behavior. I'll tell you, can we scare an elephant 1 milligram of pheromone? Yes, we can. So 1 milligram of pheromone, of which pheromone? Honeybee pheromone. If you put in 1 milligram of honeybee pheromone, elephants will run away for 6 months. It will not enter your premises at all. So that's the impact of pheromones. Another impact I will tell you, even if you touch the tube and go to the field, all the males will come and land onto your fingers. So that's the kind of sensitivity we can confuse the males. And the males are the most happiest ones because they don't have to fight to mate,
Pheromones,
So, yeah.
can we call them as like sex hormones?
Sex hormones. They are sex hormones. So what we do is, so I will tell you one classic example. So in US, so we do the eradication programs. As I mentioned, we work with 15 to 20 governments across the world, supporting spraying of these particular pheromones into the crop. Spray means it's just hardly 3 to 4 grams of pheromone per acre versus today thousands of liters of water what we are doing. So it's hardly 15-20 grams of pheromone per acre will create a phero rain. Rain droplets with the pheromone in it. So technically you're talking about 400 droplets per acre. If you do that, each droplet will behave like an artificial female, and the male will never go to its virgin female. It will be happy, romancing the artificial rain droplets for the whole its life cycle. So that's where we do. So we started confusing males across the world. So all males today, 75 different insect males are confused, and we have given exponential benefits in terms of doubling, tripling, even it has tripled the farmer's income. So that's the impact which we created. And how we do produce these pheromones, what it does cost. For the last 40 years, there were only 2 products which are sold at $1,000 per acre. So today in Amazon, we registered India's first green label pheromone product with the support of BIRAC way back in 2016, and then we got support from the industry. So overall, now we got about non-dilutive funding of more than $35 million from several governments, and we developed this portfolio. Today, we are the post-independence. No company has ever registered a new molecule, either in pharma nor in ag. So we are the first company to register 3 molecules. One is for cotton, pink bollworm. In the morning, Amitabh Kant was mentioning green hydrogen. Green is the future. So what it is? Somebody were very happy saying that cotton prices have increased to 10,000 rupees this year, and everybody, all the IT, artificial intelligence people trying to, see how much they can trade, how much they can purchase. The ground reality is totally different. Ground reality is 60% has been lost because of one pest, pink bollworm. 60% of the cotton in India. That's the reason why the price have gone 10,000 rupees. The average farmer who used to earn 1 lakh rupees has not even got 600 rupees. So the government of Punjab has paid 2,000 crore compensation for the farmers. So that is a crisis what we are living. And in the future, the climate change continues, this population keeps increasing. So how we bought this solution right from $1,000, which is 1 lakh rupees, 1,000 pounds. 1,000 pounds, 1 lakh rupees to 3,000 rupees. So the way we produce pheromones. Today, how the insect produces pheromone? The same way we produce by biotech means, by recombinant technology, using enzymes, how insect produces. We produce today by just using water and oil, the edible oil. Insect also uses edible oil to convert into pheromone. The same thing, the same genes we have transformed into plants and microbial systems, wherein these systems convert the oil into pheromones. So with this has opened up the entire, it will open up $1 billion industry for us, as well as protect all the crop protection companies in India to transform. India was only in licensing. Today we started out licensing. So we are working with top 9 companies among 20. So who are going to take these technologies. We have put seeds 5 years back, and today they see the results. So everybody will be like how we are today with support of BioRec, how we are placing the technology of pheromone, which is was so expensive on Amazon. Today everybody will be placing in different geographies. Thank you.
So I think don't hold back if you want to applaud or clap So the crops are different, and perhaps the insects to each crop would also be different. So are we covering more
These
than
are
one
like
crop?
fingerprints. So farmer will have a choice. That's another very good thing. By 2025, today farmer goes to any shop. If he buys anything, he buys a broad spectrum insecticide which kills all the predators. In our case, it's not right. We only confuse males to that species. That's all. And every crop is damaged mostly by one species, and that's what we control.
Don't confuse humans, right?
I'm planning to do that now.
Right.
Very shortly.
Thank you, thank you. Vinod is also listening, and as I mentioned, he uses and kind of a magician on the carbon atoms, hydrogen atom from gases, and he spins them around, do something which he has named String Bio. I don't know how many of you are from Delhi, but if you have seen those heaps of garbage going multi-fold, and there are often news that it has caught fire. So there are some gases which emerge from there, and that's a constant source of gas emission. And we are also aware of the fact that carbon footprint and the impact on the global environment and a challenge on the sustainability. So I will let Vinod talk about it, how the biotech solution is doing in that field.
Thanks, Dr. Manish, and thanks for Tycon Delhi for having us today. I'll actually start and pick up from where Dr. Markandeya left off about confusing humans. I'll actually start from there. Because, and I'm sure a lot of you have probably already heard, the rise of population today globally. We're going to be reaching about 10 billion people in the next 30 years. Right? And if you look at the resources that we have, in terms of land and water to feed these 10 billion people, it does not exist, right? 70% of all land today is used to grow food for animals. So as we are growing, as more and more people are out there in the world, we're going to have a severe shortage of food. So the reason I started with that is, that's a significant problem today, in terms of food and agriculture. So what we do at String is, so we are a gas fermentation company, we are an industrial biotech company. To put it very simply, I'll equate it to how beer is manufactured. I'm sure all of us must have either seen or heard or consumed microbrews, right? So what you see when you walk into a microbrewery is a 500-liter tank. And you have barley inside the tank, you have yeast inside the tank, and then after about 20-25 days, you have beer at the end of the day, right? And that's what we consume. Very similarly, from a technology perspective, that's what we do. Our fermenters or our tanks are much bigger. They're about 40-50 feet in height. They're about 10,000 liters to almost 100,000 liters in size. And we ferment gases. So instead of barley, we use waste gases like biogas that can come from organic waste. We use flared natural gas, and we convert that using our patented technology and bacteria into proteins through various steps. So it's a very complex technology that's taken us almost 8 years to develop. We have developed it indigenously from India, and we are one of the world leaders in this technology today. And we are at in terms of scale, we've started commercializing our products and taking it forward from there. I wanted to highlight a couple of use cases of our technology and why this technology is important. Because when you look at the method of conversion, the science behind it, it's very cool, right? And I won't talk about the intricacies of what happens inside the fermenter to take a gaseous substance and convert it into a solid product, which is some kind of nutritional product at the end of the day. But fundamentally, what we make these products are for animals, for plants, and for humans alike, right? And I'll give you a couple of use cases or applications of this technology. In the animal nutrition industry, soy is used as a source of protein across fishes, poultry, or pretty much any animal nutrition or animal breeding company. And 70%, as I said earlier, of land, agricultural land globally is leveraging soy plantation. So when you look at manufacturing or growing 10,000 acres of soy, what it takes about 9 to 12 months to grow that over 10,000 acres, we can actually manufacture that in 2,000 or 2 acres, right? Because ours is an industrial process. In 2 acres of non-arable land, we can manufacture almost 10,000 acres equivalent of soy. Very powerful in terms of what we can do to avoid, using that much of land. So now you can actually use arable land for growing food for humans. So that's a very powerful carbon metric that we have.
With the growing population, I think somewhere we have to all converge over that side.
Absolutely, right? Because if you see soy again, India is the 4th or 5th largest grower of soy, but the largest is in Brazil. And as we know, and if you might have heard of that, there's a lot of deforestation happening there, right? So it's severely impacting, the carbon footprint, global warming. If you guys are familiar with what's happening in that world, so we have a direct influence on how to avoid that. Another use case I'll highlight is about methane or methane gas. 10% of all methane globally comes from paddy cultivation today. There's about 350 million metric tons of methane that is emitted. It's far more potent than carbon dioxide for the environment for us. And 10% comes from paddy. One of our products, we can actually reduce methane emissions by almost 60% symbiotically on the paddy cultivation itself. And how this translates to a number that we can understand is, if you guys are familiar with COP26 and what's happened over the last couple of years with COP26 and COP27, 100 countries got together and said that we need to reduce 2% of emissions globally across all emissions, whether it's from oil and gas, transportation, agriculture. every year so that we reduce the global warming potential below 1.5 degrees every year. This one application of us for paddy cultivation has the potential, if we use it in about 50% of land that is used for growing rice, we can actually reduce it by less than 2%. Just one application, indigenously developed from India for the global marketplace, can actually reduce 2% of global warming on a year-on-year basis. So it's very powerful technology. So we are working on.
Could you give us a sense how is the 10,000 liter capacity fermenter? Would that room be, or is it bigger than this?
No, see the fermenter itself, it's a tall fermenter. It's about 50 feet in height and it's about 10 to 12 feet in diameter.
So maybe half of it?
Half of it, and then there's a couple of other pieces of equipment. So basically I would need about this much of space for the entire manufacturing facility.
And the amount of gas that it can churn into, suck out the bad gas and convert it into usable thing, how much would be the input and output?
So it depends on the application itself. If it is for rice that I talked about, I can use as simple as 75 tons of waste, segregated waste, which is probably equivalent to, so if you take a typical tier 2 city in India, they generate about 700, 800 tons of waste across the board. And some of the smarter tier 2 cities are segregating it and you get about 7,500 tons, right? So we can actually use that entire 7,500 tons of waste, convert that into biogas into proteins, and we can, service about 3 million acres of paddy cultivation.
I think the municipal corporation of people from different states must get in touch with you to put their heaps of garbage to a better use, I think.
So we're looking to pilot it in a couple of states. We haven't made it public yet, but very soon we will. We're in talks of how to make that happen in a couple of states. But that's on the biogas side. We also use natural gas, flared natural gas, and that's a big issue in the oil and gas industry. Because not all gas is actually coming to us or being used for electricity. There's a lot of gas that the industry flares for any number of reasons. So we can use that gas and convert it into value-added products as well. So that's what we're doing. We are initially the first 5 years of our existence, we bootstrapped our company with a lot of support from BIRAC. We pretty much avail every grant that BIRAC has to support new startups, so we leveraged that fund in about 4 years ago. We've gotten into the marketplace. We have a really impressive cap table. Folks, large corporates, strategics, institutions, private investors. We've raised close to about $30 million over the last 4 years. And obviously, ours is a capex-intensive company, so we don't intend to just license our technology. We are intending to be a manufacturing company as well. So we will continue to raise more funds so that we can have the impact that we truly believe this technology can have on the environment. Thank you.
Fantastic. I think all the three speakers are first in their respective domains and bringing that solution. Excellent. Thank you. I think all of you mentioned that you have raised until pre-Series A and close to Series A and looking for Series B now. So I think the earlier struggle of moving into proof of concept and building towards commercialization, let's say the longest journey, how many years? Like 5, 10?
Yeah, it's 10 years. So
10 years.
The biotech space is such, we are helpless, but it takes time to.
So 10 years of solid investment in time, energy, resources, and how would you secure, like for example, tomorrow you're telling this story to a lot of people in public. Tomorrow I want to say that I would like to become another ATGC or another Spring Bio or Immunil. How convenient it is? Have you is there an entry barrier which can be easily breached, like other IT fintech companies, e-commerce companies? So today is a unicorn, then you have 10 different similar, Flipkart, Amazon. Is that a similar story?
Yeah, I'll start. I think, no, it's not. It's not a similar story because deep tech is only one element of our business. It's the model of delivering, in our case, good health. And it has a value chain which is highly regulated. Your entry barrier is along intellectual property. You have barriers of how to approach this as a problem to solve. You have development time, which is not 3 months or 6 months, it takes years to develop. You have the regulators who are going to look at this and say, is this a safe product, is this a safe therapy, which is finally going to make an impact to patients' lives. And then after all of that, you have to be able to get this to patients in the right price point, in the right way, to get it reimbursed by governments, for them to understand that this is a value-adding benefit to their patients. So it's not an easy journey for sure. And therefore, because it's not an easy journey, you also have a different set of investors who come into play this patience game. It's a patient journey. If someone were to say, I want to wait 10 years before the return of investment is really going to make it worthwhile, then that's a different kind of investor than someone who will come in and say, look, I want to exit in 3 years, or I want to exit in 4 years.
And you would have backed up with some patent.
Yes. So we filed 3 global patents. Patents in India, which will then become patents in the globe. We filed first-in-class molecule patents. That's a very, very unique thing for innovation in India.
Yes, yes.
And then we filed that to take it forward. We believe that's going to be a game changer as far as cell and gene therapies are concerned.
Vinod, what is your patent portfolio?
So we have about 55 patents, obviously all developed in India and patented globally. And to kind of address your question, I think building a biotech company is completely different. I spent the first, 16, 17 years of my career in a non-biotech industry, right? I was more in telecommunications and data networking. So I understood that space a lot. For me, to come into biotech was also a learning process. It's a completely different journey. Even as an entrepreneur in the biotech ecosystem and an entrepreneur in a non-biotech ecosystem, the skills and the patience that you have is completely different. Because as folks here said as well, it's a much longer journey. It's not a 2-3 years. In most tech places, 2-3 years you have a beta product, you put it out in the marketplace. In biotech, it doesn't work like that. It takes 6 to 8 years just to get a good product that is, you've proven it, you've got regulatory approvals, and that's the best case scenario if you can get it out into the market in 6 to 8 years. So the funding is also very critical. I think, thanks to Dr. Manish and BIRAC organization, I would like to address that for new entrepreneurs who want to come into this ecosystem. The Indian government actually has a phenomenal program under the umbrella of BIRAC, where they actually fund very high-risk businesses. So when you take biotech companies, the risk in the initial few years is phenomenally high, because you take a long time to fail. Unlike regular tech companies, you can fail really fast. And in fact, that's one of the motto of regular tech companies. If you have to fail fast, so you're not burning money. But in biotech, it takes a long time. So you don't have early stage investors, period, in the biotech space. So the government has stepped in and is doing a phenomenal job to bring the companies to a point where they are fundable for the financial investors in this ecosystem. So it's a different journey. A journey definitely worth taking given the impact of what biotech and life sciences company can have on our ecosystem.
So from the perspective of, let's say, potential investors, 8-10 years gone in and you've reached a certain level. Now tomorrow if the investor comes and let's say you're raising 50 million and ATGC is raising 100 million, do they still have to wait for another 8 to 10 years before they start getting their return on investment? Or unlike other businesses, the trajectory is different? So I'll let Markandeya answer that question.
This 100 million fundraise was always for the last 10 years. Okay, so that ecosystem doesn't exist, frankly speaking. So I even shifted to US, but fortunately we got non-dilutive grants, which really helped me to showcase. So I gave several examples. We treat lakhs of acres. We treat lakhs of, when locusts in India attacked, there was no solution. They sprayed malathion in tons and tons and tons without realizing what would be the impact. Whereas we, from India, we are supporting the US government in several programs. We are protecting their national forests, we are protecting the forests, they are protecting their crops in lakhs of acres. So we are spraying in such a way that there will be no need of any insecticide application. So this is the change which has to trigger, we have showcased. And today what I see is, after my people used to laugh when I used to pitch. So for startups, when I used to say 100 million is required, nobody understands why 100 million. This guy is crazy. So, but the fact is, to even develop one small molecule to the proof of concept in biotech, it's 5 million. To register, it's taken another 50-60 million dollars. So this is a cost, and if we are talking about a portfolio to develop, so there is no ecosystem, at least in India, to support that. But however, BIRAC triggered that. BIRAC triggered that. When we showcase that this technology can be bought down to 3,000 rupees per acre, and with no insecticide application at all, it's insecticide replacement, then industry started reacting. Today in India, 2 companies, they're supporting more than 100 crores for one product launch. So that is the impact which we created. And I think going forward, it's not be, the return of investment for 100 million will not be long. It's now registering and getting the money in place. So
looking at some inflection.
Yeah, I'm talking about phase 1 billion by the next 4-5 years, and second wave it will be like several $1 billion, because the entire industry will take up this new space which we are trying to create, and it's happening. It's not like still in proof of concept. Today in India, 2 lakh farmers have purchased from Amazon and various other companies who are selling, and they are seeing results. This is the government of India saying. If you Google ATGC Biotech, all news is about mating deception. It is all about our company.
So would it be fair to say that all 3, in fact, these are solutions from India, for
100%.
India, of course, because these are affordable, accessible, but these are also for the world. So, just like Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam and Honorable Prime Minister's clarion call that India can become Atmanirbhar by addressing its unmet need, and India can also become a reference point and source of innovation hub, especially in the biotech area, to address these larger global challenges.
India used to import 1 kilogram of pheromone for all the insect pests to monitor what is the population prevailing in 1 acre. Today we are exporting 30 metric tons for the government programs. Imagine if this 30 metric tons, if we sell commercially, we are talking about $200 million of revenue. So that is the impact which we are creating.
And 8 crore per treatment for the leukemia patient,
Bringing it
brought
down.
down to $100,000.
I think there is it's not one size fits all. I mean, in the case of here, we're talking of acres and acres of land. In Neil's case, we're treating literally microcosms of people, small people. Every patient is a customer, and every customer is different from the next customer. So there is a personalization of the entire approach, because that's what truly health is. I can't take paracetamol works for everyone because it's generic and it works that way because it inhibits at a principle level, but every headache is not the same.
It is personalized medicine, and that is where the pharma is converting into biopharma, and then precision medicine and personalized medicine. Absolutely. So, Vinod, any last word before we wrap up?
No, I think as you said, it's technologies. For biotechnologies, it's great. If you see the evolution of biotechnology in India in the last few years, we're starting to see a lot more innovative companies growing. Right? Obviously, it's taken us a number of years, like it does, because you work with cells, fundamentally with cells. But in the next decade, I'm very hopeful that we'll see a lot more companies emerge from India that are making impact not just in India but globally as well.
So kindly join me with thanking all the panelists here, and these are the exemplary biotech endeavors in the country. And as Vinod said, the ecosystem has actually grown and actually become mature, and 10-12 years what it takes, the companies seeded 10-12 years ago, they are now getting recognized in the public eyes. So I think
Can I ask you a question?
sure, go ahead.
Will the
Mike.
exits in this space come from IPOs, acquisitions by companies like DuPont, etc., or mergers? Like, where are the exits for companies like yours?
So to repeat the question, the ask is that how would the exits come? Would it come from follow-on investments, IPO, or
Strategic acquisitions? What is the
Strategic,
And,
anything green technology, it's 50x at least. That's where the market for acquisition, and that's the value of biotech which adds up.
50 and so?
50x of that's the return of investment which we are talking about.
So to answer your question, I would say it's all of them, right? It's all of them. There's nothing different in biotech that's different in any other tech industry. So you can get it through IPOs, strategic, secondary sales. It's fundamentally all of them. The only difference I would say is when you look at other tech companies versus biotech. Here we work with cells, so it takes us a longer time to get there. But once we are at that inflection point, we are no different than any other tech company. It's a longer incubation period.
I think that answer has brought us some 9 minutes of brownie points. It says we still have 9 minutes to go. In case you have any more questions, I can open the floor. Maybe one here and then.
Okay, thank you. My question is that, especially for the deep tech solutions that we have for the healthcare system or the agricultural systems, where you need to cross, not only the initial stage, like proof of concept, which is a high risk zone, also the regulatory part, which is also quite tough. So how is your experience with respect to the Indian regulatory? Because this is what we hear quite a lot about, that it's not like up to the mark, we do not have like clear path there, those kind of things. So what is your experience in that?
I think it's been very positive. One of the big shifts that's happened in the last 3 to 4 years is a growing recognition by the government that it's not all tuberculosis, malaria, and infectious diseases that's going to solve the country's new problems. Chronic diseases, lifestyle diseases, cancer, they are the big killers of the next generation. COVID was also a very, very important journey in the recognition that there could be other ways of looking at risk. A fundamental way that regulators used to look at risk was, koi marna nahi chahiye. Agar koi mare, so the government is going to get pulled up in parliament, there's going to be a problem. But when you look at something which is going to kill us anyway, and you have to find a way to solve for it, then the urgency, the reform that is needed in thinking, the ability to bring risk forward and think about that, say, okay, you've done this, how do we mitigate that risk? Becomes a very important conversation. And the second development that's happened is a lot of help from friendly government nations saying, no, this is what our journey has been, why don't you look at these and adopt the necessary practices to change maybe 30, 40-year-old acts to be able to be more progressive, to help startups like ourselves, to help cutting-edge technologies reach the masses faster. So I think the journey has been very positive because this is a new science.
Maybe something work in progress,
Yes.
moving towards that.
Hi, good evening. Congratulations on your hard work and this innovation, and to BIRAC as well for supporting you. My name is Varun Jain. I'm CEO of a full-service law firm here called Singhania and Partners. But my connection to biotech goes back to 3 years ago when I was a resident director for Gilead Sciences in India, and at that point, when I joined in 2016-17, people didn't know Gilead, and then when the Remdesivir drug was launched, it became a household name. But the reason I bring it up is because I was very close to the Global General Counsel and our former chairman, who passed away, John Martin. He was a very progressive and a very publicly conscious person in terms of biotech innovation. So the first HIV drug for Gilead was out-licensed to the Indian pharmaceutical manufacturers and became a huge success. Took case study in IP technology transfer, leading to bringing the cost down for 170, I believe, emerging markets at that point. And I think it was a very progressive thing to do. So what I'm sensing here is really an out-licensing opportunity for you all, which is, really congratulations to you for, taking the lead on things like CAR-T, which companies are still trying to figure out, or, on the pheromone side. But I feel there is a huge opportunity here for Indian companies now to become the Gilead of the emerging market region. So I wish you much success in that, and I think if BIRAC would like to take that up with MEA and see how to maybe constructively enable that, it can be a great shot in the arm for the whole industry.
You are absolutely right. I think all three technologies, they're spreading, ATTC is spreading in 19 countries, if I know. And as Arun said, that this is one in, like us, one among very few countries where the CAR T cell therapy is happening. And Vinod's technology also one among several millions. So I think there is absolute potential for out licensing and reversing that trend of in licensing of technologies from outside. So India can now become, as you indicated, like Gilead's activity, we can become the source of innovation and as innovation hub for the entire.
In fact, just to add to that, we are actually setting up one of the largest gas fermentation companies outside of India. We're doing one in India. We're doing one with our partner outside of India as well, as we speak.
So I think the trend is now moving from looking at joint ventures within for India, coming external companies coming here. We are also stepping out, and as you mentioned, you asked, I think the return on investment at this stage is other than usual, other than non-conventional, and potentially much higher. High risk but high reward. One last question.
Firstly, sir, at the outset, I would like to thank, as a citizen of this country, to all three of you, sir, for doing so much for this medical science. It was an eye-opener session, and really so much of things are being done in India. And my question to you, sir, I mean, you're focusing on the leukemia. There are other life, threatening. Maybe it's called a genetic thing, like cerebral palsy, autism, and Down syndromes kind of thing. And you mentioned about stem cell kind of a thing. So is it? I don't know whether it's the right term, but is something being done on to address that, because it's a neuro-related issue? So one question is for you, sir, and one is for you, Dr. Markandeya, is that since you are controlling the population of the animals, insects, so there's a lot of biggest problem in most of the countries, and especially in India, is of the stray dogs. The population is it's like you said that elephant can be controlled. Is there something related to this stray dogs population control? Because as
I will hold the answers here. One last question, and then we can answer all the three questions together. I think the person in the white shirt, he was raising hands, and then that would be end of it.
I just want to thank to all the trainers who were sitting over here to supporting us as a researcher. I'm also working for 5 years in CAR T cell therapy and stem cell and regenerative medicine from University of Oxford. So I have opened my own company here. We have our own CRO team. So I want to ask a question like what I have investigated with the CAR T cell therapy. CAR T cell therapy is giving a fantastic result in B lymphoma cells. But sir, apart from that, apart from ALL disease, it's not working that great because the cells are getting lysate. Okay, if the disease are coming back, it's showing to the clinical trials we done with the animal study, it passed on, but with the human studies we are getting the problems again. Okay, and we are more into the genetics as well, like DMD issue that you are talking about.
If you can narrow down to your question.
Yes, my question is that, sir, there is any clinical research that prove that CAR T cells is implementing to other cancers as well or not?
It's a similar question. So maybe we have 1 minute, and maybe
1 minute to answer two questions. Yes, the first proof of concept was in leukemia. As with everything that is new, there are certain challenges that we uncover only when we do it. True that not all patients get cured. We've been hitting a higher rate of success because it's the binder technology that we use. When you look at other types of cancers, the evolution of proof from blood cancers to organ cancers is still evolving. Because the type of disease itself is different. In blood cancers, it's easier because the tumor is in the blood. So when you inject cells which are edited cells, they can address the tumor right away. When it moves to the organ, they have to go through a spheroidal construct. They have to be able to mitigate oxygen tension and lots of other things.
That is why it is personalized and precision medicine.
Precision.
And then spread out.
But the second question was on can we do it for cerebral palsies and other kinds of genetic disorders. So we are selling gene therapy company. Those are typically not addressed through cell therapies. They're addressed through gene therapies, and gene therapies typically are best done first single gene. There's a single gene mutation. But most of the indications that you spoke about are multifactorial. They're not a single gene disorder. So it will take a long time before we can get there.
Thank you. And I think there was a question for you. Can it be extendable to, let's say, stray dogs, for example?
No, mammalians have lost their senses. So evolution has already gone. We don't recognize smell anymore.
I think let's join us for a great round of applause for.
I think absolutely a fascinating panel, and I have to say the best panel so far of the day for me personally. Very interesting, very, I think as someone said, eye-opening, and I think also proud of the fact that some deep tech innovation from India will hopefully also get us kudos globally. So please join me again, actually. Quick round of applause for them, for everyone, for the supporters and the innovators, and we have small tokens of appreciation. Please come. I think